The old house stood at the end of a deserted road, its roof tiles crumbling, the rusty gate creaking in the evening wind. After 20 years, the woman finally returned. In her memory, this was a place filled with harshness and silence, ruled by a stern father, a man who had never once said, "I'm proud of you." Now she is a successful woman in a big city, yet inside, she still feels hollow because of the family distance. The house lay still, heavy with the scent of rotting wood and dust, suddenly pulling everything back. Then her eyes stopped at the pull-down cord on the ceiling, the way up to the attic, where her father had forbidden her to go. Beyond that door, a truth awaited that could change everything she had ever believed. She stood at the doorway, her shoes tapping lightly against the decaying wooden floor. The smell of damp wood mingled with the faint scent of old coffee, evoking mornings long past in this house. Back then, the radio was always playing country music, the raspy voice of some singer blending with the noise of machines from the shop where her father worked after night shifts. For her, childhood in this small town was not filled with sweetness, but with strict discipline. Her father was an immigrant, once working in factories and auto shops to support the family. He lived with an unshakable belief in the American dream, that hard work and discipline would carry his children far. That very belief made him harsh. Whenever she made a small mistake, his eyes turned cold as steel. When her grades were not high enough, he only muttered sternly, "You can do better." He never once said, "I'm proud of you," which her friends often heard from their parents. That little girl grew up without hugs, without words of praise, and the distance only widened. When she was old enough, she chose to leave, heading for the big city where the lights never went out. She became a successful woman with a stable job and a comfortable life there. Yet every night, an emptiness lingered. Success could not erase the pain of never being acknowledged by her father. As she entered the living room, her eyes caught on something familiar resting on a wooden shelf, a faded veteran's badge. She froze. As a child, she had never asked why her father kept it. Looking closer now, she saw dates etched from the war years. Another side of him emerged, not just a laborer, but a veteran who had endured loss. Suddenly, she understood. Perhaps those invisible scars had made him so stern and distant. She sat on an old wooden chair, eyes sweeping across the dust-covered room. The photographs were gone, and only empty frames remained. Her voice echoed in her head. Why did he never once say he was proud of me? That question stabbed deep, haunting her for 20 long years. A draft slipped through a crack in the door, sending a thin layer of dust swirling. She shivered, sensing the house wanted to tell her something. Down the dark hallway, the fading light of day cast a beam across the wall, illuminating a faint pull cord hanging from the ceiling. She had seen it once as a child, but never dared touch it. She held her breath. Bitterness surged back, yet mingled with it was a strange feeling, like something was waiting to be revealed. An explanation, a truth. And in that moment, she knew. This return would not just be about looking back at memories. It would be about facing them. She paced slowly through the old house, the afternoon light slipping through dusty windows. The kitchen was cold, the pots rusted, the air thick with mildew, and the smell of oil was stale. Pulling open a drawer, she was startled when a notebook fell out. Its cover was frayed at the edges. Inside were the familiar strokes of her father's handwriting. Her name repeated, notes on her grades, the day she performed at a school recital, even her college entrance exam. Each line felt like a touch straight to her heart. He had silently tracked every step of her life, though he never spoke of it. An old computer, coated in dust, stood in the corner of the room. Curious, she powered it on. The screen flickered before revealing folders of photographs. One was taken at Yellowstone, the whole family standing before a magnificent waterfall. In the picture, the little girl beamed, her mother's arms wrapped around her, while her father stood behind, his face tense, but his eyes fixed on his daughter. A memory surfaced. That day had been freezing, and he had quietly draped his jacket over her shoulders without a word. Looking back now, she realized that was his way of showing love. Suddenly, her phone buzzed in her pocket. It was the old neighbor, Mrs. Johnson. Her shaky voice came through the line. "Your father often helped the church gather supplies for the poor, never wanting anyone to know. He even donated to the town's scholarship fund." She went silent. For years, she had only seen him as cold and distant, never knowing he had quietly served the community. Another memory hit her hard. At 17, she had fought bitterly with him. He had forbidden her from going to prom, saying, "There are too many wrong things waiting for you there." She had screamed back, accusing him of not understanding. That night, she cried into her pillow, vowing to leave the house forever. Now, remembering it, she saw the hidden fear in his words. His harshness had been a shield, a way to protect her. She rose to her feet and walked down the hallway. The wallpaper was yellowed and stained. The fading light stretched across it in long slants. She saw it clearly in that glow, the old pull cord dangling from the ceiling up to the attic. Since childhood, he had always forbidden her to go near it. His stern voice still echoed in her memory. "Dangerous. Don't go up there." She swallowed hard. The pieces were coming together. The notes, the photographs, the neighbor's words. All of it stood in stark contrast to the image of a loveless man she had carried for 20 years. The house seemed to whisper, "There is another truth you have not yet seen." She lifted her eyes, staring at the cord. Her heartbeat quickened. There might be the key to everything. The love, the silence, and the years she had never understood. She stood directly beneath the pull cord, her heart pounding. Her father had forbidden her from going anywhere near the attic for years. Now, facing it, that command echoed in her mind like a final test. She drew a deep breath and reached up to pull. The hinges screeched, dust rained down, and she coughed sharply. The folding wooden ladder slid down, shaking violently. She placed her foot on the first rung, her whole body tense. With each step, the ladder groaned, the rotting wood threatening to snap under her weight. On the third rung, the ladder suddenly swayed. She slipped, her heart skipping a beat, but managed to clutch the railing just in time. Sweat beaded on her skin. But she kept climbing, refusing to turn back. The feeling was like the final barrier her father had left behind. If you want to know the truth, you must be brave enough to face it. The attic opened into darkness, filled with the smell of old wood and rusted metal. She turned on the flashlight on her phone, its beam cutting across a ceiling thick with cobwebs. Shadows took shape. Cardboard boxes, sheets draped over hidden objects. The silence was so intense it was eerie, broken only by the hammering of her heartbeat. Suddenly, from a far corner came a faint sound, perhaps just a mouse or the wind slipping through the planks, but enough to make her hair stand on end. She held her breath, then stepped forward. In the dim light, her eyes landed on a long wooden box, and on top of it rested a small tin case engraved with the words U.S. Army. Her hands trembled as she opened it, revealing military medals and a folded flag. An unexpected piece of the puzzle. Her father was a laborer, an immigrant, and a veteran who once went to war. Memories flooded back. She had often seen him sitting alone on the porch as a child, eyes distant. When she asked about it, he only shook his head in silence. Now she understood. Those were the ghosts of war he carried inside. Perhaps those very scars made him stern, rigid, and unable to show affection. She swept the light across the back wall. Something looked different. A section of wood was brighter, less dusty. She stepped closer, touching it. The surface was smooth, unlike the faded boards around it. Then her fingers brushed against a small cord hidden in the crack. Her heart tightened. She hesitated for a moment, then pulled firmly. Click. A panel shifted, revealing a narrow, dark gap. Dust billowed up, but her flashlight cut through, showing a hidden passage. Before her, there was a secret room her father had concealed for years. The air was cold, the silence heavy, as if guarding truths that had never been told. She bent down and slowly crawled through the narrow opening. Inside was a small, cold, silent space, filled with the smell of old wood and yellowed paper. Her flashlight swept across neatly stacked cartons, bundles of letters tied with twine, and a wooden chest stained with age. She knelt and lifted the lid. Inside lay relics carefully preserved. A small Bible, its spine worn but crowded with pencil notes. Her father had underlined passages about faith, endurance, and love. In the margin was a note, "For my daughter, may you always find your light." Tears rolled down her cheeks. Carefully, she untied one bundle of letters. The first bore strong, clear handwriting. "To my daughter, when you are ready to read this." Her chest tightened. All her life she had thought her father incapable of expressing affection. Yet here, in these lines, was proof that he had chosen another way. To write it all down. In the letter, he confessed that he had quietly deposited every bit of savings into a college fund, afraid she might feel too poor to chase her opportunities. He apologized for missing her graduation. That night he had to work overtime at the factory, but he had still sat in the parking lot outside the hall, listening to the cheers, smiling in the darkness. "I didn't want you to see me in greasy work clothes," he wrote, "but I was prouder than ever." She kept reading, her tears soaking the paper. Another letter recounted how he had stood at the back of the auditorium during her 10th grade piano recital. He hadn't gone inside, only watched through the glass door, afraid that his awkward presence might rattle her confidence. "I never missed your moment. You just didn't see me." In another envelope, she found a copy of a letter her father had sent to the president's office, voicing his opinion on labor policies. He hadn't only cared about his family, he had hoped for a better society. This was not the narrow, cold man she had imagined. He believed in doing what was right, even if no one knew. She laughed through her tears when she read a hurried note where he admitted sneaking into her school one night to fix the wobbly piano bench she always used so she could practice comfortably. His hands had shaken so severely that the janitor nearly caught him. "I was never good with words," he wrote, "but I want you to know. I love you in all these small ways." Sitting in the dim little room, she wept and smiled simultaneously. For years, she had accused him of being unfeeling, but the truth was that love had always been there. Quiet, steady, written in every letter, hidden in every keepsake. And at the bottom of the stack lay a larger envelope, sealed tightly, marked with the words, Open when you're ready. Her heart clenched. Her fingers trembled as she held the thick envelope. The words, "Open when you're ready," challenging the heart that had been closed for so long. She took a deep breath, then slowly tore the seal. A stack of papers slipped out. These were her father's final letters, written only months before he passed away. If you are reading this letter, I am likely no longer with you. I know there has always been a distance between us, one I never found enough words to bridge. I was strict, not because I did not love you, but because I was afraid. Afraid you would fail in this competitive country. Afraid you would not be strong enough to stand tall once I was gone. But you must believe I have always been proud. Proud more than anything, she broke down, clutching the pages against her chest. The bitterness of 20 years shattered like glass. Memories rushed in. The time she had skipped his funeral out of anger, unwilling to come back. Regret twisted inside her. And now, the truth lay bare. He had always been watching, always loving, only in a different way. Digging through the wooden box, she found another small envelope with an unused plane ticket inside. The date was only weeks before his death. He had planned to come to New York to see her, but perhaps illness or work had held him back. She hugged the ticket tightly, like a knife had cut straight into her heart. All those years she had believed he didn't care, when in truth, he had been trying to find his way back to her. Her mind spinning, she sank to the wooden floor, the letters scattered around her. A desperate question echoed inside. "Dad, why didn't you just tell me? Just once. Why not say it?" The words dissolved into the air, answered only by wind slipping through the cracks. But as her tears finally dried, she saw it differently. Her father hadn't chosen words because he believed actions lasted longer. Every overtime shift, every quiet note about her achievements, every letter written in silence was proof of a steadfast love. A love that needed no flourish, only to be carried on. She clutched the miniature wooden horse that remained in the box, the toy her father had carved by hand when she was 8. The wood was worn, the paint faded, but inside it carried the devotion of a silent father. Now she understood. Love never disappears. It only waits to be found. In that moment, she made a decision. This legacy could not remain hidden in a dark room. It had to be shared so that his quiet love could become a light for others. The next morning, she awoke with swollen eyes, yet her heart felt strangely light. The letters lay neatly in the cloth bag beside her. She knew this could not remain just a private story. Her father had written them with the hope that they would travel further. Her first step was to bring part of the keepsakes to the town's small museum. The staff opened each letter with trembling hands. One whispered, "This is not just a family legacy. This is community history." They promised to display them so that people would know even a laborer, an unknown veteran, had left behind a mark of love and faith. Sitting in the old living room that evening, she opened her laptop. With trembling fingers, she began to type a post for social media. For 20 years, I believed my father never loved me. But in the attic, I found hundreds of letters where he wrote of his love and his faith in goodness. If you still have parents, please cherish every moment. Don't wait until it's too late. She attached a photo of the wooden horse and a line from one of his letters. "I'm proud of you, always." Within a single night, the post spread everywhere. The hashtag Family Redemption quickly became a trend. Young people reshared it, telling their own stories about their parents. A veteran commented, "Your father was like our brothers, Men who weren't good with sweet words, but whose love ran deep. A well-known artist wrote, "Thank you for reminding me to call my father." Her phone rang non-stop. A family podcast invited her to speak. A local university asked her to address its students. And most strikingly, a TEDx in a neighboring state sent an invitation. "We believe your story will inspire the whole community." Staring at the flood of notifications, she felt a lump in her throat. Her father had once written that the light of goodness must be shared, and now it was happening. Not just within this house, but thousands of distant hearts. She closed her laptop, sat still, and looked around the dim room, suddenly brightened by the moonlight streaming through the window. Inside, she felt the quiet certainty that her father was still here, watching each step she took. For the first time, she felt truly at peace. A week later, the old house on the quiet street came alive again. For the first time in decades, the long wooden dining table in the living room was wiped clean, covered with a simple white cloth. The woman invited neighbors, a few old friends, and a group of veterans from the town for dinner. Though belated, she called it a small Thanksgiving, a way to honor her father and all those who had once sacrificed in silence. The aroma of roast turkey filled the air, and the scent of pumpkin pie stirred childhood memories. Everyone gathered around the table sharing stories about her father. One neighbor recalled quietly leaving bags of food at the doors of struggling families. A veteran spoke of his resilience and loyalty during his years of service. These stories made her heart overflow. Her father was a strict parent and a man who quietly supported an entire community. After dinner, as she cleaned the kitchen, she unexpectedly discovered a small notebook hidden under an old cabinet. It was her mother's diary. The short, tender lines read, "He doesn't say much, but every night he worries about her. I know he loves her more than anything. He just doesn't know how to show it." Her mother's trembling words confirmed everything. She broke down, clutching the diary to her chest. There was no longer any doubt. His love had been real, only expressed in silence. Night fell, and she sat on the porch gazing at the starry sky when the guests had gone. Cool breeze carried the scent of wood and fallen leaves. For the first time in years, she did not feel alone. Her heart was healed, no longer weighed down by resentment. Everything had been replaced by forgiveness and gratitude. An idea sparked in her mind. If her father had spent his life believing in goodness, she could turn that belief into concrete action. The next day, she announced a small scholarship in her father's name, dedicated to students whose parents were laborers or veterans in the town. She wanted the next generation to know that dreams could still be nurtured, even from humble families. As she watched the children receive their scholarships, their eyes shining bright, she saw herself in them. But the difference was clear this time. She carried a legacy, the love and faith her father had left behind. That night, she stepped onto the porch again, sitting quietly beneath the sweep of the Milky Way. In that moment, she felt as though she had been reborn. No longer the daughter desperate for recognition, but a woman entrusted with carrying forward the light of goodness. Dawn spread a gentle golden hue across the town. The old house stood silent, but in her heart, it was no longer a burden of the past. She locked the door, stepped down the porch, and safely tucked the miniature wooden horse in her bag as a reminder of her father's quiet love. The old car roared to life, its wheels rolling slowly away from the familiar street. As she merged onto the highway, the sky opened wide. Streaks of pink clouds scattered across deep blue. The radio played an old country song about family, about fathers who worked themselves weary to give their children a future. She smiled, tears slipping down her cheeks. She never felt closer to her father, even though he was gone. On the road, she thought about the letters, the photographs, and her mother's diary. They were not just memories, but guiding stars for the path ahead. Her father had lived by a simple belief: to be good, to keep faith in kindness, and that light would show the way. She carried that belief in her heart, ready to share it with the next generation. Her phone buzzed. A message from a student read, "Your story made me call my dad for the first time in years. Thank you for reminding me to cherish him." She gripped the steering wheel, her heart trembling. Her father's legacy was no longer hidden in the attic. It had reached distant hearts. That was precisely what he had wanted. The road stretched endlessly ahead. She envisioned the podcast she would start, conversations where people could share about family, forgiveness, and faith. She would call it Humankind Stories, a place where stories like her father's would never be forgotten. The sun climbed higher, its radiant light pouring through the windshield. She drew a deep breath, feeling freer and more at peace than ever. No longer carrying the weight of resentment, she moved forward with lighter shoulders, carrying love, faith, and the responsibility of passing them on. And now, her story was no longer just her own. It belonged to all of us. The greatest legacy parents leave behind is not a house or possessions, but the belief that their children can live with goodness, pass it on, and keep the light alive for those who follow. If you believe in these values, join us at Humankind Stories. Subscribe, share, so we can keep the flame alive.